Now, if I select an external hard drive or an internal hard drive that I can partition, one of the things that I can do is I can partition the drive into any of these defaults, which will be equal sized, and I can also change the partitions by moving things up or down. I can add a partition down here. I'm not going to do this because I don't want to erase this drive, but I can do any kind of partitioning that I want. And what people often do if they have an external drive like this, it's very convenient. This one is used for Time Machine. I want as much space there as possible. This one is 80 gigabytes, which happens to be the size of the internal hard drive on my previous computer. And this, in fact, is an image of what I had on my last computer when I switched over to this one. So it serves as an archive, but it also has a complete operating system on it. And it's very useful to have that, because if you have a complete operating system on it, if you are worried that something is wrong with your primary hard drive, you can't run First Aid and repair it if you've booted from that, but you can choose to start up from another drive, and then I would not be able to run First Aid to repair this disk, but I could repair this one. Now here's a tip. The installation disk for Mac OS X has the installer on it, but it also has a copy of Disk Utility on it. So if all else fails, make certain that you know where your installation disk is, because you can boot from the installation disk you won't be installing. You can quit out of the installer and go up to the menu and choose to open Disk Utility, and then you can go in, having booted from the CD or DVD, then you can go in and repair a hard disk that otherwise, if you were booting from, you couldn't repair. Be very careful with your installation disk, because one of the other things that you can do with the installation disk is to change passwords. So anyone who has their hands on a Mac OS X installation disk can change the passwords on your computer. So that installation disk has to be protected very, very carefully. Now, the last thing I'm going to point out here is the RAID feature, and that allows you to create various configurations in which the disk or disks that you're using with your computer are configured to copy data so that it's in two places. This protects against hardware failures. Time Machine protects against accidental corruption of files so that you have to go back in time. This protects against the case where a failure in the disk, or it could be a power failure that's not caught by a UPS system, causes partial data to be written. The computer is writing data out to disk, power fails, and half the data is not yet written. In the case of RAID, the data will be written to 2, 3, or 4 places, so one of those will be recoverable. RAID is not a Mac OS X or Apple technology. It's very common industry technology, and as hard drives become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and bigger and bigger and bigger, more and more people are using RAID devices. Restore lets you work with disk images, and that's what we'll talk about in the next segment.